Scott Nelson.
Jim Baumstark.
Julie Noon.
James Dolan.
Alex Kamilovich.
Thanks. So now we're actually going to go to our public hearing right now. So I'd like to call our public hearing meeting to order for verbal attendance of board members. We just did it. We're not going to do it again. We're going to go to our public hearing. This is our e-learning plan presentation.
Ironic that we're talking e-learning. I can't get the mic. I gotta reread the plan.
All right, thanks. Thank you.
Now we're good.
Oh, look at that. 2 mics. So, good evening. Thanks for giving us this opportunity. 3 years ago, actually, we utilized a similar format as an opportunity for e-learning, and that really was sparked by the whole necessity of the pandemic and remote teaching and learning and the state creating a process. So now 3 years later, it's a very similar process, a very similar plan. This, though, at least we feel like, is more of a insurance policy if we wanted to take advantage of what might be a weather-related opportunity, hopefully not, who knows, a pandemic-induced reason to go to e-learning. But similar criteria in terms of the required number of hours for teaching or instruction of our children, posting of assignments, collecting of that information, like all of those procedures and details are sort of re-included in this plan from the original experience that we had 3 years ago. And we used the plan, it worked. That's the best part. So the wheel is not broken. We are just now under the guidelines of every 3 years needing to resubmit this e-learning plan. But again, as we sit here today in August, there's no anticipation necessarily, but if we don't do this now, follow the procedures such as this with a public hearing, it goes to North Cook and that superintendent, we wouldn't be able to take advantage of the e-learning without the approval here tonight. So that's really what this is about, is reinvigorating this process and opportunity if we needed to use it into the future.
You did a great job.
Okay. So that's.
Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Silverman? I just want to reinstate that we're doing this because we have to, if we ever want to use an e-learning plan. Is that correct?
Yes. If we didn't jump through these scenarios and this process, if it's January and for some reason we don't want to necessarily utilize a traditional non-attendance day or weather day, and we wanted to do our e-learning plan, we could, but we would not be in compliance without this step here. So that's what it's about. There are districts going in both directions where they just want nothing to do with this anymore, and c'est la vie, and that's great. But I think for us as an option, it's worthwhile to have in our back pocket.
We're viewing this as a tool. We don't actually have any intent to use it, even for something that's weather-related. I mean, I could only think of a scenario where there was some more catastrophic kind of an event that would take multiple schools, necessitating them to be closed, or 3 days or longer of sub-zero weather, or something that would be extreme, where we would employ this kind of a model.
All right, any questions?
Oh, I'll ask, is there anything particularly different about this 3-year plan than the one we had before, or is it basically cut, paste, change the year at this point?
Yeah, there were hypothetical scenarios in the original plan, and actually since we were able to use it, we've just updated the language to reflect that this is how we're doing it, if that makes any sense. So it's now sort of a tested process, and that's in our language. So we will do this before we're kind of planning to do those things, and they work, so that's good.
Okay.
All right, thanks for your presentation. Since we're in a public hearing, this is an opportunity for audience comments. Please keep your comments for this opportunity right now related to the e-learning plan. There will be 2 additional comment sections in the regular meeting. Anyone wishing to address the board can submit a comment card. Kathy, do we have any comment cards for the e-learning plan? Thank you. All right, any other questions? Otherwise, we'll adjourn the public hearing. All right, the public hearing is now adjourned. We are moving back to our original meeting. And we will come to our communication section. Dr. Deli?
We just have some approvals first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, our approvals. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
Second. Baumstark.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now I need approval of the June 20th and July 17th regular meeting and executive session minutes. May I have a motion and a second to approve the regular and executive session minutes?
So moved. Dolan.
Can I have a roll call for this?
Dolan.
Aye.
Palmolevitz.
Aye.
Moon. Aye. Nelson.
Aye.
Supos. Aye. Stefani. Aye. Baumstark.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we move to our communication section. Dr. Deli.
Thank you. Well, ready or not, we will embark on a new school year. We are always very excited to welcome back our current families, our returning families, and new families to our school district. This is always something that everyone looks forward to in terms of transitioning. We also realize that this is a very important time for families and for children as we transition back into school routines. And so that is really at the forefront of everyone as we care about this process. This year is even more exciting because we have undergone some large-scale renovations across the district. So our learning spaces across the district look fundamentally different than they did last year. We're all very thankful for that. There are too many people to thank individually, but I can tell you that there have been teams of tradesmen and women, our furniture provider, our teachers, our support staff, our custodial and maintenance crews. Everyone has been working very hard, particularly over the last few weeks, to make sure that we have a smooth opening to school in a welcoming environment for children. I want to thank everyone who has had a hand in making that a reality. The last few weeks have been very stressful. There is typical hand-wringing that's a part of that process because we want it to be right. And I just appreciate everyone's hard work. As with any large school construction project in a school district, some work has really come down to the wire, and in some cases, the work is not yet complete. We are working diligently to make sure that all the work is complete and that finishing touches are tended to. Some of our classrooms across the district will start the year with temporary air conditioning units until permanent univentilators can be installed. It should be also known that the school district was very deliberate about ordering these unit ventilators back in January to ensure that they would be installed for the start of school. Unfortunately, despite our best efforts and beyond our control, these unit ventilators did not arrive in time for them to be installed prior to the start of school. But particularly as we look at what is predicted to be a very hot week, I want you to know that our classroom settings will have air conditioning. Some will have temporary air conditioning until such time that those permanent unit ventilators can be installed, which will be in short order. We will also create punch lists of small items that still need to be accomplished. So we thank everyone for their patience and understanding as we go through this. Also this evening, I have a special recognition. Dr. Heather Santella is with us. Can you? raise your hand, like, just so we can all see you. Dr. Centella works as the assistant principal for student services at ATIA. Heather earned her EDD in educational leadership last spring. Her dissertation topic was on principal leadership attributes and competencies in high-performing schools. Maybe you could actually tell us the exact title. I think I got most of it. But we congratulate you, Heather. It's certainly both a professional and personal accomplishment. I'm sure your family is very proud of you. I know you have some visitors with you tonight. We're very proud of you as a school district. We benefit every day from your leadership. This is an accomplishment that certainly goes above and beyond. We congratulate you and appreciate all of your hard work.
Is that our new name tag?
Thanks again. That concludes my comments for this evening.
Thank you, and thank you again, and congratulations, Dr. Centella. All right, next we have our audience comments. Anyone wishing to address the board can submit a comment card available at the check-in table and give it to the Executive Director of Communications and Strategic Planning. The Executive Director will call community members who submit cards forward. They will be asked to introduce themselves and describe their relationship with the district. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And please know the board will be taking notes, but will be in a listening mode only, and an appropriate response will be given in a timely manner. We also ask that you submit one comment per opportunity. Kathy, do we have any comments? We do not have any comments. Okay. Next, we'll move along to our consideration of resolutions consent agenda. We have the 23055 personnel report, the 23056 payroll warrants, the 23057 vendor warrants, the 23058 approval of surplus equipment and furniture donation / reuse. Are there any questions on those reports? Can I ask for a motion and a second for approval?
Second, Bob Stark.
Katie, may I have a roll call?
Stefani? Supos? Nelson?
Aye.
Moon?
Aye.
Dolan?
Aye.
Kamalevich?
Aye.
Tom Stark?
Aye.
Motion carries. We'll move along to the consideration of other resolutions. We'll start with the 23059 Village / D34 ATIA land transfer.
So, yeah, so briefly, this is a land transfer that's going to move from the village to the board and from the park district to the board. There's 2 pieces of land. It's actually the soccer fields just here at ATIA and some land that's shared between the park center and ATIA. And so this just transfers that land as sort of spelled out in the March 20, 2001 agreement with the village, and this is now finally, land is being transferred over to the district.
Does anyone have any questions about this? And we're still kind of partners with them based on this land agreement, correct?
We are, and we have an agreement about easement and access and things like that.
All right. Any questions, anybody? No?
So this is just finalized what was basically agreed to back 15, whatever years ago. Yeah, it's just sort of
Exactly.
final.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Just making sure.
All right. Could I have a motion and a second to accept the recommendation to approve the land transfer as presented?
So moved, Moon.
Katie, may I have a roll call?
Dolan?
Aye.
Stefani? Supos? Nelson?
Aye.
Moon?
Aye.
Kamalevich?
Aye.
Tom Stark?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, we have the 23060 e-learning plan. We had a presentation about that earlier in a public hearing. Does anyone have any questions? All right. Can I have a motion and a second to accept the recommendation to approve the e-learning plan as presented?
So moved, Kimolevich.
Second, Baumstark.
Katie, may I have a roll call?
Baumgartner?
Aye.
Dolan?
Aye.
Stuckey? Nelson?
Aye.
Moon?
Aye.
Kimolevich?
Aye.
Motion carries. And next, we have the 23061, the GEA Collective Bargaining Agreement. Dr. Deli.
Yes, thank you. So, after several months of collaborative and deliberate work, we're pleased to share publicly the recently ratified collective bargaining agreement between the Glenview Education Association and the District 34 Board of Education. I'd like to thank the GEA President, Nan Ross Meredith, and members of the bargaining team, some of whom are present this evening. I'd like to thank you, Scott Nelson, our president, for your involvement in the process, members of the administrative team who served on that team as well, along with Justin Petrarca, counsel for the board. We believe this agreement sets a solid foundation for all stakeholders to benefit from a successful and a productive 5-year agreement. To illustrate a little bit further, I'll have both Kevin and Eric talk about some of the highlights of the agreement.
So I will share some of the highlights on the non-economic issues and topics that we successfully addressed over the course of the process. In summary, the agreement makes many important clarifications regarding a variety of areas. As Dr. Deli said, it's a 5-year agreement covering the terms of July 1st of this year, 2023, through June 30, 2028. Overall, our process allowed for collaboration and improvement in a variety of areas, intended to enhance communication and understanding across our school system. We streamlined some of our governance structures, for example, district committees, to increase our efficiency and better align with current and recent practice of the district. We added language such as in the preamble, principles, and some other relevant sections throughout the agreement to align with our strategic plan and related to our embracing an inclusive school environment and the diversity of our learning community. And we added some language to clarify educator roles and work conditions, things like duty-free lunch, consistent with school code, educator safety, and supervision. And Eric's going to talk about some of the financial items.
So in terms of salary provisions, there was both a step and a base increase in the first 2 years of this 5-year contract, and then there were flat increases in the last 3. So on average, the board spent just over 4% on average for each of those 5 years. In terms of health and dental healthcare cost increases, the board kept their maximum exposure of an increase of up to 6.25% each year. So total new money for the contract was just over $8 million. Total new money for health and dental was $5 million, bringing the total new money over the 5-year term to just over $13 million, about $2.6 million on average per year.
Does anyone have any questions? I just want to add, as part of the process, it was great to collaboratively work with the teachers and administration to get to a spot that I think everybody feels good about, and I'm looking forward to the next 5 years of peace and quiet in the community. No, just kidding. No, it was great. I'm glad that we were able to work really well together as a team, and it's good for the schools and it's good for the community that we have such great teachers that want to be part of the process. Thank you.
Scott, can I say one more thing? We also will really want to throw a quick shout out to the members of our business department and HR department, because now there's a fairly heavy lift, given the timing of this, to get this all into place. So I really appreciate the efforts of those folks as well.
All right, can I ask for a motion and a second to accept recommendation of the GEA contract as presented?
So moved, Dolan.
Second, Baumstark.
Kitty, could I have a roll call?
Kimolevich? Aye. Dolan?
Aye.
Stefani? Aye. Stuckey? Nelson?
Aye.
Moon?
Aye.
Baumgartner?
Aye.
Motion carries. Congrats. A photo op. All right, let's go. Where's the team?
Who do you want, Kathy?
All right. How about Claire, too?
Well, we've got team members here.
How about the whole team?
Anyone who's here, just come on.
Let's go over there. Kathy, can we get in front of that?
Oh, nice. No, this is.
No. If we have to. Claire. Claire. Chumming a little. There you go.
You all look great. Okay, next we will go to a contract with ProCare Therapy, long-term sub-psychologist. Kevin?
This is an agreement to cover a period of time for one of our school psychologists who was out on leave, maternity leave. And we had some internal coverage handling another one, but this one was really vital to make sure that there was continuity for Tia, particularly at this early part of the year. So this is what we would consider one of the very hard-to-fill positions as it is to hire folks, let alone cover for a leave.
Does anyone have any questions? Could I have a motion and a second to accept the recommendation to approve the contract as presented?
So moved, Kimmelevich.
Kitty, may I have a roll call?
Moon,
Aye.
Baumstark,
Aye.
Stefani. Supos. Nelson.
Aye.
Kimmelevich.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, now we get to go to discussion. Dr. Deli, Public Land Partnership.
Yes, thank you. Let me know when you can see it. Do I need to get out of it or anything? Or?
Is this in our e-learning plan?
Excellent, thank you. So I would like to share publicly a possibility that the school district has, the board has discussed in closed session because there is a potential land or lease opportunity that is presenting itself in collaboration with the Village of Glenview, District 34, the Glenview Park District, and possibly Glenbrook District 225 that I just would like to share some preliminary information with the public on this topic. There is a rather unique opportunity that may be presenting itself that we wanted to have some further investigation into. As some in the community know, the Pulte Group, which is a development group, wishes to develop the Signode site for residential housing. Their plan currently involves a total acreage of about 60 acres of land. And I'll show you on a map exactly where it's situated in the next slide. There are 39 estate single-family residences that are planned, 34 single-family homes. The estates are larger homes, 65 townhomes. There is a section of this development that is being proposed for 55 and older. That's in an effort to mitigate some of the student yield that we have expressed concern over for some time. Our demographers estimate approximately 97 students could be yielded from this development. You know, that of course is always an educated guess based on trends that the demographer is seeing in new developments, and, you know, usually very specific to communities. The village has offered to facilitate the acquisition of a portion of this 60 acres, specifically around 14 acres, for what could be a shared use by the Park District, the High School District, and District 34. So we've had some of those conversations. Whether it winds up being a purchase or a lease to own scenario for all of these entities is very preliminary. There has to be much more conversation about the details that would go into an arrangement like this. For reference, do we have the graphic, Kathy?
It's above that.
Thank you. Okay. So, you know, this is, I don't know if this is working, but you can see Westlake Avenue here, and then Finkston. So this is the Signode site currently. I mean, it doesn't look like this currently, but this is where it's situated. And you can see where some of this proposed development is situated. So this is current residential area. This part of the parcel would be developed for the types of housing that I just mentioned. Then, in this section of the property that you see outlined in red here generally, there's about 14 acres of what we're referring to as what could become public land. So the Park District has an interest in developing a portion of this site for its purposes, much of which is still being discussed by the Park District. There would be a parking area sort of in this area where I'm hovering. And then what you wouldn't know unless we pointed it out is that there is an existing two-story structure where this long red rectangle is located. And we have identified this as a possible site for a district office. This is a two-story office structure that has not been utilized in some time. And that is encompassed also in this total of 14 acres. So this just gives you a reference point for the part of town that we're talking about. If you've driven past it, you know it's a large parcel, and there is some opportunity there for various local agencies to perhaps join forces. The D34 use of this space is as follows. We currently have an administration building at 1401 Greenwood. It's a one-story structure. We have vastly outgrown that building that I believe was it in the 60s, Steve? The building's in poor condition, in addition to the fact that it's just not properly sized anymore for a contemporary operation of a school district. It's about 15,000 feet, which includes the maintenance garage. It sits on about an acre and a half if you include all of the parking that's associated with that site. The new space would give us a much larger opportunity to do a lot of important work. We do have an office staff of 60. They're not all in the building all of the time, but right now they're in a 15,000 square foot building. It's very cramped. Many people, 2, sometimes 3 people, are sharing an office space that would otherwise be associated with one individual. What we hope to do is create more adequate workspace for those who work at the district office, for storage, warehouse purposes, multi-use spaces for meetings, professional development, our PTA and BPAC groups to have meeting space, a food pantry, a centralized parent sort of curriculum library. Just if you trend with some of that thinking, we know that those are important needs, and to have it centralized in one location we think would be very powerful. There could be also a relationship with other local entities to create satellite locations for themselves. So when you think about the library or other entities within the community that we could partner with to broaden our services to District 34 families and students, this kind of an opportunity would lend itself well to that. There would also be some, I'll say, purposefully unfinished space until, as this becomes more of a reality, this is very preliminary, we could really start to begin thinking about the aspects of our work that we've never had an opportunity to think about before, because we've always been defined by the amount of space that we have. So it's really an exciting opportunity. The parking would be more than ample, we believe, in that space that I pointed out, which is more in the center. It would be shared with the Park District for whatever their purposes are. It would be shared with District 34. I mentioned the high school district earlier. They were at one point contemplating some parking area. I don't know what their current thinking is on that, but I believe it was going to be, was it here, Eric?
Yeah, I think so.
I think in this, or is that where the building is? It's somewhere over in here. That would be, obviously across from the high school. I will not speak to their plans. I know that was being contemplated at one point. But we wanted to just bring this to the public's attention because it is something that's being contemplated. There's really no additional information that I have to share. It's a developing story, and I'll keep you apprised as things move along, and we'll report back to the community as well.
It's an exciting opportunity, just knowing that one of the things that we did take off of the table back when we did the referendum was doing anything to the office building that is pretty dilapidated. So it'd be nice to be able to complete a project as presented to the community in the beginning, if this ever comes to any fruition. Does anyone have any other thoughts or questions? Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Next, we have the Village of Glenview, District 34, discussion of intergovernmental agreement for SRO.
Yes. So the presentation that I'm going to work through this evening is not fundamentally different than what I did at our last board meeting. I'd like this to serve as a review and other people for opportunity, another opportunity rather for people to consume the information, develop questions, formulate opinions. But at our last meeting, I did talk about another opportunity that we have with the village to partner on school resource officers, specifically at each one of our middle schools. So one SRO at each of our 2 middle schools. In general terms, and I think I prefaced this the last time I walked through this presentation, that you can Google definitions of SROs, models for how they're employed, and arguably find different ways that municipalities go about doing this. A school resource officer, I'll refer to them as SROs moving forward here, are sworn law enforcement officers. They are employed by a local police department, so they would be employed by the Glenview Police Department. They receive training to work specifically in school buildings to help maintain a safe, secure, and welcoming learning environment. SROs are clearly identified. We will have some say as to whether or not they are actually in a uniform or whether they are in clothing that clearly identifies them as a police officer. And they do carry a standard issued weapon. These are police officers that are working in school. So we want to be very clear with that from the beginning. We don't want people to be surprised that there's something to this model that was not revealed or discussed. The goal here would be to build positive relationships with students, staff, and families. Right now, the relationship that most people would see at one of our middle schools is the police responding to an event that has taken place. It could be a crisis, it could be some other kind of a problem. It's a response mechanism. What we would look forward to doing is developing proactive, positive relationships with staff, with students, and with families. Furthermore, to educate students and staff about safety within the school and outside of the school, in addition to crime prevention. Directly work with the schools on threat assessment, emergency preparedness, and crisis response on a regular basis. Collaborate with school administrators, teachers, and law enforcement, and to deter potential threats and promote a secure learning environment. So these are sort of the fundamental tenets of SRO work in school. These are broad strokes. What we know is that there are SRO models across the United States. I mentioned earlier that you could Google individual districts. You may find models that look different from one another in terms of how many SROs there are, how they're funded, how they're deployed, et cetera, based on unique characteristics. Again, SROs, and ours would be included in this, receive training on de-escalation, mental health issues, conflict resolution, and like I mentioned, crisis preparedness and security assessments. We do have peer districts not too far from us who do employ an SRO model. They're listed here. District 34, it should be noticed, did have school resource officers in our middle schools until 2012. So each one of the middle schools did have an SRO that was assigned to the building. Around that time, the school district was having to make some tough decisions with respect to its budget. And there were some structural concerns that rose to the level where some decisions needed to be made about cutting expenses. This was one of those items that the board at the time chose to peel back. No judgment there. I was not here in 2012, and so the conditions were such at the time that they felt like some tough decisions needed to be made, and they made them. But we are no stranger to that model. It's been some time, but we have had SROs in our middle schools. Adding SROs will, we hope, build on the positive and proactive relationship between our school district, the police department, and align with the model that District 225 has in place with their SROs. I shared with you some incident referral data both at Springman and ATIA. This was merely to illustrate that we have seen double and in some cases triple-digit increases in some of the behaviors that we're seeing from children at the middle school level. You know, none of this should be perceived as all falling into some critical criminal category. You know, some of this is purely behavioral. Some of this is actually more extreme behaviors that would warrant some form of intersection with the police department. So I share that again. This has not changed since the last time we talked about this. Our police response, which is measured by 911 calls, you can see for the 21-22 school year, was right around 100 calls. You see the breakdown by school. We haven't been able to assemble the actual numbers from 22-23. We know they'll be higher. I don't know how much higher. A word of caution on this data, it's simply a reference point. It doesn't mean that every one of these 911 calls was for, some very egregious type of behavior. 911's the mechanism for getting the police to the building. Someone would have decided that it was important enough or serious enough that a 911 call be placed. We understand that the keys to success really, they're simple. They're not simple to attain necessarily, but the objectives are simple. The officers need to be carefully selected. So, and we have had an opportunity to meet with and interview those who were interested in either of these two roles at the middle schools. They must be specifically trained, which they will be. We've received assurances from the police department that they will receive specific SRO training, in addition to youth training and exposures that they've otherwise had in the course of doing their jobs. They need to be properly equipped. They need to be integrated members of the school community. They cannot be viewed as just a standalone stranger that's either looking for things or simply to be there without a purpose. They need to be part of the familial element that we're trying to achieve in our school district, in our middle school specifically. They need to be partners with mental health staff, the social workers, the psychologists that we have in the school district. They are not in place of those professionally trained staff. It's an extension of the wraparound work that we otherwise try to do as a school district, and will be receiving additional support for through our arrangement with North Cook Regional Office of Education, which we've talked about at previous meetings as well. Kathy, you can go to the... So a commonly asked question is, well, geez, how do you know a model like this even works? What will you use in making decisions about the effectiveness, whether to continue a program like this? I can tell you why while it has not been specifically generated yet, we will have qualitative data that we will look at. We will interview people, we'll have testimonials from people who work closely with the SRO to get their feelings about how the model is working. Things that are working well, things that maybe are not working well and need to be modified or changed, we'll be very open to this in year one. We'll also have some quantitative data that we can look at. We will survey individuals. We'll track the frequency of interactions with the police, the interactions with the administrative staff for different types of infractions, like I had broken down a few slides ago, and the types of administrative dispositions that are associated with certain behaviors. So all of that needs to really be working as a team, not in isolation. This is not a model that works when you have a police silo, a social work silo, a school psych silo, an administration silo. The model doesn't work siloed. It has to be an integrated team, I believe, for it to be successful. If at any time we believe that the SRO model is not working, we're dissatisfied with results, we will have an intergovernmental agreement, and I'll talk about the timing of that in a moment, but we'll be able to remove ourselves from an agreement that is not meeting our needs. If we have a problem with one of the officers, it's at our full discretion to report that, have the officer changed out, or simply removed and, we determine another course of action. So we'll make sure that that's delineated in the agreement. With respect to timeline, interviews have been conducted, so we've worked with the police department. We have identified individuals that we believe are highly qualified and well-trained for the positions. In September, my hope is to bring an intergovernmental agreement between the village and the school district. The timing right now looks like the village would act on this intergovernmental agreement first, and then it would come to our board for your consideration. That's how the timing's looking now. And the SROs would officially begin working the week of the 18th. Excuse me, initially there was some consideration given to trying to have them start more toward the beginning of the school year, but the intergovernmental agreement just isn't complete yet. It's going back and forth between attorneys, and just part of no one's fault, just part of the normal course of action. So with that, I'll just take a break and let you know that directionally, this is still something that I'm recommending that the school district try. It's a model that, as far as I know, although it predates me, was a model that worked well. I think we learned enough from the last time we did this to make the model even better. And I would not get us into an agreement that would have us tied to something that wasn't good for children, which is the primary reason we're here, their families, or our staff.
Diane?
Hi, Dane. Thank you for the presentation. I'm not sure, can you hear me okay? I just wanted to clarify, I know we've all been asking a lot of questions, and I know there's information that you're going to get for us, so I don't want to, I don't want to go into any of that, because I know you're working on that, and I appreciate that. What I did want to ask, something that while you were talking, and you alluded to this a little bit, but I just wanted to confirm, you were kind of alluding to the fact that this is something we've done before. This is not truly a new program for our district. Do we have some institutional knowledge, both in the police, with the police in Glenview, and with staff that has been here for a very long time, that might help make this work even better?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the process of assembling what I would refer to as testimonials, people who have been around long enough to know how the system worked,
Right.
what some of the strengths were, what some of the pitfalls were.
Right.
And I would use all of that to inform, the more of the internal workings of how this looks in a school district. So, I can't say that I have anything that I can point to in terms of documents or things that are artifacts of that time, but I'm working on assembling testimonials from the people who were here at the time, both at the police department and in the school district.
Thank you. I think it's important for us to all keep in mind, though, that this is not something that's truly new to the Glenview community. This is something that's being perhaps revived with the hopes that it's something that could be helpful to the schools.
Right, and I would argue even better. So to the extent
Right.
that whatever that model was can be improved upon, I stand ready to do that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I mean, I do recall from 2012 going to board meetings, and there were quite a few parents speaking to keep the school resource officers
Right.
on the budget at the time.
I remember having school resource officers.
Yeah, and anecdotally, I remember Officer Ken Smith volunteering to partner with the Glenview Education Foundation when they did Dancing with the Local Stars. He was one of their performers. I don't think he won, though. Does anyone else have any other questions or thoughts?
I have two, they're not really questions, just two like recommendations maybe about how to think about this. You alluded to the idea that an SRO is not you can't just find a definition, right? It's a different model in different places. And if you do a lot of research on it, a lot of concerns pop up, like what are the things that can go wrong? And I think maybe, like in even another page in the presentation can be like, what are the traditional concerns that come out in the media about SROs? And then just like, why do we think that's maybe how are we going to deal with that, or why do we think it's not applicable to our particular district? I just have a few that I wrote down, like criminalizing conduct, behavior that shouldn't be criminalized. Some people argue that it increases violence in the schools, not decreases. It's ineffective, doesn't actually make things a safer place. You get bad outcomes with the wrong person in a job, unnecessary escalation, increasing anxiety among students. So like, I'm personally not so concerned about these. I think our model, as we've been discussing it, addresses many of these concerns, but I think it could be a helpful, because I think when people research, you do a Google search and, what are the top 5 concerns with this SRO? These are the kind of things that come up, and so why are they not an issue for us? Or why do we, clearly there's there's a mitigation plan or whatever about why we don't think it's, and then the other idea is like this idea, I know we're talking about having an agreement, but that's like more of a contractual relationship. I also think it could be useful to have, I'll call it like an operating procedures document that's a living document that kind of outlines the rules of engagement that, we start out with something, but then it's just like a good teacher would do, is you reflect on what's going well, what's not going well, and modify that over time. So it's not locked in, but it's like, when should they be involved? Should a uniform, some of these things that you've talked about, but I feel like it could be a separate document from the agreement, because I feel like that's a static thing that gets signed once.
Sure, like a
Versus-
handbook of some
Kind of
kind.
like a student handbook, like a handbook of the rules of engagement.
Yeah.
And it would feel good to have that idea that we can modify it as things are going, and make it better, like, in real time.
Yeah, good suggestions.
Anyone else?
I'll just kind of make one comment. As we set an expectation of what data we're going to track or what defines success, I think we need to be very careful and thoughtful about independent variables. Things happen like technology violations that are independent of their presence, right? And also to not be confused by causation versus correlation. And the qualitative feedback is going to be really instrumental when you go back to what is the key to success. The integrated membership of the community is not quantifiable. Partnering with mental health staff and community resources is not really quantifiable. So I think we really need to be very thoughtful about what does success look like and over what time frame, because that's going to be really instrumental for us to be able to evaluate how successful is it. And if it's not meeting our standards, what has to be different, to Jim's point, in terms of policy, practices, or procedures to make it successful or move away from it.
Good point. Thank you.
Anyone else? We'll be talking about this again in September, so.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, next we'll move to our press issue 112 for discussion. Dr. Daly.
Yeah, I mean, pretty straightforward. We do
So
use.
annual I mean, some of these are 5-year reviews, some of them are annual.
Yeah. I can't think of anything of particular import that would be called out with this. Now, I will tell you, I think of the next series. Do we have the next one yet, or no? No. I have a feeling the next one's going to be a lot more meaty and have some more substantive kind of changes.
Based on new law changes? and
Yes.
stuff? Yeah, this seemed like a lot of footnote changes. All right. We'll move along to health and dental renewal rates for CY 2024.
What we have tonight is a recommendation for a couple changes to our health and dental plan offering, and then a recommendation from the committee about the rate increases for the new calendar year. This is a plan/calendar year that we go off of, so we've got 2 that make up a school year. History, well, District 34 has a self-funded, partially self-funded health and dental program. We've got our standing committee, the insurance subcommittee, that discusses the trends. what's going on in the marketplace and, things that we should be taking into consideration for our program as we move forward. We're always trying to ensure that the premiums cover the projected claims so that we have a sustainable, self-funded program. Oh. And so what we do is we take a look at the last 12 months, most importantly, and what we've seen is that, unfortunately, PPO has been trending above budget by more than 10%. HMO has been sustaining itself a little over 1%, and dental, which we never pay too much attention to, but actually because it mostly trends in the right direction. We're also taking a look at high utilization of this PPO plan and high-cost claimants that are expected to be ongoing. So we've got insurance for our insurance, this stop-loss coverage that we have, and that's when an individual claimant goes above a certain amount, that's when that insurance kicks in. So we do have a couple of high-cost claimants that are driving a lot of what we're seeing in terms of our trend. Dental's going according to as what we have expected. Stop loss came in slightly under in terms of our renewal. But based on what we're seeing and our vision for the future, the committee discussed the elimination of the PPO 750. 750 refers to the deductible amount. The addition of another PPO with the deductible of $1,250, which is higher than what we've made available in the past, and replacing, based on the IRS rules, the high deductible health plan, the $2,800 deductible with the $3,000 deductible. And, part of this recommendation that has to do with these changes in the plan has to do with trying to make, trying to create opportunities both for singles and families that can be a little bit cheaper. So if you're not a high user, there's a lower deductible associated with the higher, lower premium with the higher deductible. So if anyone is trying to have coverage for their entire family, the addition of this PPO 1250 will provide another opportunity within the PPO ranks, if you will, for family coverage. We think the PPO 750 is probably a little too pricey, and you've seen this cadence in the past where every number of years we try and take a stab at trying to control costs. So elimination of the 750, addition of the PPO 1250, replacement of the high deductible health plan with the $3,000 figure. In addition, as always, this committee comes with a recommendation to increase the PPO plans, and in this case for the next calendar year 24, 15.8%. HMO plans, based on the trends, 3%, and dental, 2%. And that's pretty much where our recommendation stands for next year.
Does anyone have any questions? Can I didn't ask or let you know ahead of time, what is the breakdown between PPO and HMO, percentage-wise, you think?
Great question.
Sorry.
I can follow up with the whole board
I
after.
was wondering,
I just don't have that.
feels like the HMO is working out pretty well.
There's definitely a growing trend for folks shifting from PPO to HMO.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Yes.
That's all I was. All right, any other questions? All right, let's move along to unaudited fiscal year 23 financials. Eric, you get the mic for a while.
Yeah. So I'll make this one brief, and I do have more detailed slides that will be posted in board docs, but essentially I'll try and boil this down to the nitty-gritty. Here we're looking at operating funds. On the left is what we budgeted in revenues and then our actual revenues. So we took in about $740,000 less than we budgeted, but still pretty close to our guess when it comes to how we've done historically. Here we're looking at our FY23 operating budgeted expense to actual. So we budgeted 81.5 and came in just under 81. It's a difference of $523,000, which is also less than a percentage off budget. When you put it all together across all funds, actual revenue compared to actual expense, you'll see that we came out with a $23.5 million deficit, and we budgeted $36 million. This was purposeful. This was us spending down dollars for construction that the board had issued in the prior years, and so you never know exactly how construction is going to pan out, but we took a pretty good guess, and we came in within the ballpark there. Finally, we look at operating funds, actual revenue compared to actual expense, and while the board adopted a budget with a $4.4 million operating surplus, we came in at 4.2, so not too far off, pretty much in line, both in terms of revenues and expenses, and then ultimately the surplus, which came in pretty close to what we had budgeted. Highlights are just that we came in within 1% on both revenues and expenses, and our surplus 4.2, which is good according to plan and positive movement for the year.
So basically, we're on plan within less than 0.5%.
Yeah.
Which with the size of the budget's pretty good. I mean,
Yeah, I think so. Any other questions? And how about our fiscal year 24 final budget presentation?
All right.
Since we're talking budgets.
Okay, so we've been here before. We've talked about this budget in tentative form. Now we're looking at for the first time in its final form. One thing that you'll see that's different, and I'll just call it out now, is the request and baked-in budget of an $11 million transfer. This transfer is the first of, I believe, two that is dollars coming from our operating fund balance that we've committed toward the construction project. If you remember in the original promise, there was a $21 million contribution. We're now getting to the point where within this fiscal year, we will have spent down all the bond proceeds, the $119 million, and now it's on us to begin expending some of what we had promised. So, we don't actually levy for any dollars in capital projects. This is dollars we've got in our ed, transportation, O&M funds sitting in fund balance. And what we've baked in now is the first transfer to help fund some of the construction costs that will come up that the bond proceeds weren't able to cover. And that results in what you'll see now is a deficit. And what I've tried to do is net out the transfer so you can see and compare that it's not really an $8.7 million deficit. That's mostly because of the transfer. Net the transfer, you're still seeing this now $2.3 million figure, surplus in the operating funds. So just to call that out, because this is the main difference between what you saw in the tentative budget. These percentages still remain very close. As you know, most of our revenues come from local property taxes or local sources. Most of our money goes towards salary and benefits. The difference here is in the right-hand column. Those are the assumptions, and I've highlighted in red any changes from the tentative budget. So interest went up a little bit, CPPRT went up a little bit to be more reflective of what we had actually recognized this fiscal year. Small change when it comes to federal funding. For the most part, state and federal revenue assumptions have remained the same. We've got the update in the benefit increases, little change in supplies, same with transportation fund. And now what you're seeing, again, with this $11 million transfer in all funds, is a $27.5 million deficit. Again, planned, all part of our spending associated with construction. And then just in the operating funds, now showing an $8.7 million deficit. Again, netting out the transfer, you're still seeing a $2.3 million surplus. This is contemplating if our final budget plays out exactly as we have it. we would end up with a 65% operating fund balance. So this is the start of that declining fund balance just based on that $11 million transfer. But it does show you a direction that we're headed in with our overall fund balance. We believe this budget aligns to our strategic goals for the year, now including an $11 million transfer. Revenues are still outpacing our expenses, and we've got $30 million in estimated construction costs for this fiscal year, which actually still touches 2 summers. Just some of the requirements again. We're going to hold a public hearing in September, formally adopt the budget, and we'll get that submitted to the county and the state.
Any questions?
Just to follow up, sorry, this transfer is the second is going to be a hearing that we'll have, and that'll be because it's a permanent, one-time fixed transfer from probably the Ed Fund. There's a
Are we
little
going to do it out of one fund or multiple funds?
I believe we're going to do it out of the Ed Fund, but we've got a little bit of time to sort that out and get through the levy, see what our fund balance percentages are in each of the funds before we make that final call. That'll be in FY25.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Is it okay to talk about how the county is not giving us our money on time right now?
Yes. Did you want me to talk about it?
Yeah.
So we actually got notification from the county that there's going to be a multi-month delay in the issuance of their property taxes for this fall installment. And so, unfortunately, we don't have any working cash bonds that we were contemplating issuing this year like last year. And we made a loan to the bond and interest fund so we can make our December 1 bond payment. The county is no longer offering any type of loan program like they did last year. And so, unfortunately, we're in a position where we most likely will need to contemplate issuing TAWs, T-A-W, tax anticipation warrants. It's like a loan against property taxes that we are expecting and others would expect too. So I asked Liz Hennessy to join us both in September and October to begin evaluating what that would look like so we could potentially have those tax anticipation warrants in the bank in November ready to go for our December 1 bond payment is to not miss that.
And so multiple taxing districts, school districts, park districts may have these issues coming up because Cook County is delaying their bills, correct?
That's right. And you don't have a lot of flexibility with your other funds. So it's pretty much bond and interest sits on its own. You either go out and issue debt,
Yeah.
or you have a working cash bond that you're able to make a loan on a temporary basis for. So most likely we'll be looking at tax anticipation warrants, and we can discuss that in September.
Sounds good. I just wanted to get that out there because it's the county's fault.
Yep,
But we got to deal with it.
that's right.
Eric, when was the last time we issued tax anticipation warrants?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. Not in the last 8 years, certainly. I'm not sure if we ever have. I just don't know.
Just to draw a connection to previous board discussion, this is one of the, challenges with drawing down the fund balance. And, as we continue to go forward, the next big milestone will be how that work bids out. And when we talk, the CFAC presentation in January, we'll take a look at where we get to those danger zones. So this is the kind of thing that we could potentially see more of. So we need to be careful from that perspective
That's true.
as a board.
It's good foreshadowing. Any other questions? All right, let's move to Kathy. Do we have any audience comments? This is another opportunity for audience comments, and we will have 2 at every meeting going forward as usual. We'll go to the report section. I have the number 1 FOIA report, the number 2 construction change order report, the number 3 referendum expense report, the number 4 building use report, the number 5 administrator and teacher salary and benefit report, And number 6, the following meeting agenda. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts on those reports? All right, no other business? I don't think, does anyone have any other business they want to discuss? If not, we will move to adjournment. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Have a great year, whether your children are here or not.